Hello, everyone. This is Brent from The Second Look. Tonight, I have the pleasure of speaking with JJ Moon. JJ, hello.
Hello. Hi.
Nice to see you. Yeah, I've been wanting to get you on this little podcast to chat about you and kind of where you're coming from and where you want to go, and sharing some of those experiences with people who might be in a similar situation or want to hear from people, kind of their peers, and all in the purpose of learning from these experiences, kind of sharing the load as we all kind of move forward through this industry. So I know you're a screenwriter. So when did that start?
When did it start? I mean, my desire to write and to be a writer, I think I was just pre-programmed with that.
Mm,
I always enjoyed writing stories, poetry, music, but as a career in Hollywood, I would say that really started probably 12 years ago, where I started taking it very seriously as a career choice. And yeah,
okay.
yeah, I think that's
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I'm the same way. I think there was always a creativity kind of in me. It would come out in writing stories when I was very young, inspired by my father and his friends who would make funny little skit videos. So I was doing those things. But yeah, it wasn't until, well, actually, it was kind of in late middle school, early high school, where it was this is what I want to do. And then kind of from there, it becomes, okay, well, how do you do that? All right, so if you're a creative person, you're into writing. When does that turn into like screenwriting as a specific pursuit? And what's your first step in that direction?
okay. That's a great question. So I made that decision, I think, after living in Los Angeles for a few years. The way I got in and started actually started as a extra
Hmm,
on film and TV sets. It
okay.
seemed like the easiest way in for me. I actually have a theater and arts background, so my degree is in theater and arts. And so I started on the theater side of the business. And not that I really wanted to be an actor necessarily, that just seemed like the way in because I don't know, how do you become a writer? It
Right.
seemed very elusive. I grew up in New Jersey. I was so far removed from the business that just seemed like a fantasy world. And what you see are actors on the screen. So I thought, well, I want to be in the business. I know that. So let me just get over there and start getting on sets. And so once you're on set, then you start to meet people. And that's really, I think, one
Uh,
beginning step. Everybody has their way in, right? Some people go to school for this, some people sit at desks. I cannot sit at a desk. I would rather die. I have ADHD. It's just never going to happen. I need to be free to get up and move around, even when I'm writing. But so step one for me was getting on to sets and getting to see how it all works. For me, that helped my brain to be able to wrap around the idea of storytelling in that format, right? And so then the second part of that was taking classes and learning it. It's a very particular skill. I studied creative writing and poetry and those types of writing, but they don't translate. And so I enrolled at UCLA Extension and took a bunch of classes there. I took online classes. I studied writing at Santa Monica College. And so that was sort of the next step, was learning the actual craft, reading books, reading scripts, talking to writers. What does it take to do it? How do you discipline yourself? So for me, the first step in anything is learning and then trying to get some kind of experience. So then the third step was, applying for internships at different production companies to actually see the inner workings. Once the script is written, then what? And also, what are you looking for when you're reading scripts? So I started doing coverage on scripts for production companies. So coverage is when you read a script and you tell the producer, this is what this script is about, and here's why you may or may not be interested in it. I mean, it's more than that, but you know what I'm saying. So those were kind of the steps I took. So I say one was getting involved in the industry in the way I knew how to, which was getting onto sets as an actor. Then I moved up to PA, got to know people, started taking classes to learn the craft, reading books, then applying for internships to actually get into the companies. How does it work? Give me some scripts to read. Let me learn by doing, seeing. And then I started doing rewrites and polishes for other people's scripts, which you don't get credit for, but it's an invaluable experience to have.
Yeah.
And then from there you just start putting yourself out there. You just
Yeah, you transition more over into now you're writing your own scripts, and now you're in the position to do the job with all of that background behind you, which sounds like must have been so informative, right? So like so that you're not just you have a plan, maybe you've seen where this goes. You can kind of work your or work on script knowing that these are the steps or that these are the expectations, and you're not just sitting at home writing hoping someone likes it. I think uh,
yeah.
I just want to highlight the takeaway here is that you did a lot of work to a lot of prep to be able to be a writer. You're not just a writer. You did all that prep beforehand, and I think that is really important. I really like the getting onto sets any way you can idea. For you, it was as an extra, and I think that's pretty smart, right? Because it's almost the only job that you can get just kind of off the street. You know, like you
Mhm.
see a posting for it, you sign up, you show up, and you're on a movie set. You don't have
Yeah.
to have any experience, any skills, but suddenly you're on the front line of this work. That's great. That's a really good bit of advice. Okay, what did you learn while doing coverage, working for production companies? Maybe some things that you were kind of light bulb moments for you that you then applied into your writing.
So I think first and foremost, for me personally, what I learned is you don't have to be perfect, right? So while my path was taking classes and doing all this stuff to prep, that's also part of my personality of being a bit of a perfectionist, right? It's like I got to master the skill before I can even start talking about it, owning that moniker of writing, putting myself out there. A lot of people don't struggle with that. That's my journey. So for me, actually getting to read coverage and reading people's scripts and thinking, well, it's not so great. How is this guy getting their stuff out there and read? This is ready. You thought this was ready, and not to be mean or critical, but sometimes you're just like, wow, okay. But that's good because it's like, yeah, but and I've heard other people say this before, your script is really just a blueprint. It doesn't have to be perfect because no matter where that script lands, it's going to change. And I think that is something that people who are just starting out in this industry or want to be in this industry need to understand that whatever you write is going to be shredded, torn apart, grow a thick skin now,
Hmm.
learn to take criticism, learn to love criticism, invite the criticism in to help you grow
Yeah.
and get better. Which is also what I learned by doing the coverage is, you're going to get a lot of feedback. And it's not because you're not a good writer. It's not because you don't have a great idea. It's because each person who reads it has a very distinct vision
Mm.
for what they want the story to be. And so you also have to be open to that. You have to learn that this is a collaborative art form. It is not a solo art form. No one writes a script and someone says, that's perfect. I'm going to make it exactly as you wrote it.
Right.
I don't know that maybe that's happened to someone somewhere, but then you're a unicorn and I
Right.
bow to you.
Right. Right.
you know so that was a big thing. I think learning you don't have to be perfect, learn to take criticism. Yeah, I think those were some of the big things, and just seeing how it's done. Honestly, you have to read a lot of scripts before you really get a flow for that style of writing because it is so unique.
Yeah. It's very technical, and it can be yeah. It's reading a script versus reading a book. It's kind of a whole different thing. And knowing what works and what doesn't in both mediums is definitely a skill people need. And you wouldn't get that unless you started reading scripts and seeing really the mechanics of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the point you made about kind of, well, the not being perfect, but also not assuming that because they have notes that it is imperfect, right? Like you're saying, like a producer or a production company, they kind of have a scope and a direction they want to go in. Maybe it's a brand thing, and maybe your script, is like close to it, but not quite exactly what they would do, but it
Mhm.
has potential. So then you have company A over here trying to push it in this direction. You've got it over company B. They're trying to move it over here, and neither one is. It's not like a good or bad thing. Like you're saying, it's that that's what they want to see, or that's what they're good at making. It's more of a this kind of movie. So yeah, being prepared to change a lot about your baby if you want to
Yeah.
get it made.
Yeah.
Now, do you have experience with that on your own stuff? And can you give us an example of maybe something like that that's happened to you?
Sure. So, yeah, I have a lot of experience with it, just my own personal writing. One thing I think is super invaluable for anyone at any phase in their career, but especially if you're starting out, is to have a writing group with people that you really trust. Because I get a lot of great feedback from the people in my writing group. First and foremost, they give great notes. We met taking a workshop together. So we all were coming from the same, hey, this is exactly how we're going to format this particular style. It was actually a Christmas movie writing course that we'd all taken. So,
Okay.
which leads me to then I've had a few shopping agreements on different scripts, and I had a movie made actually earlier this year. So we finished shooting in January, so that was really exciting. But that was a 3-month process of writing and rewriting and writing and rewriting. The producer had a very distinct idea as to what she wanted. And also, it was a holiday movie, or is a holiday movie. And that is a very, very, very specific box that you have to fit into that format with a lot of rules. Some people look at that in bulk. I love the challenge. I think, okay, great. Give me a little box and let me see how far I can push things inside of this containment, right? How can I really be creative within these boundaries? So for me, that's a really fun challenge. And it also sets up these parameters where I know exactly what's expected of me. And I like that. So, but
Yeah.
it's tough. It's hard. It's like I would write something and I would think, this is fantastic. And someone else would read it and say, why did your character do that?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
it seems good.
and if you're working outside of that specific subgenre, you might not get notes like that. You might get notes like, I don't like the main character, or some really broad note that you're like, well, I don't know what you mean. I can try a few things, but in this case, yeah, like actually a benefit to you to have that those guide rails, to work within. And I'm totally with you there on using the restrictions, either it's budgetary or creatively, or within a genre to work within, because I do think it should inspire you rather than hold you back.
Yeah. Yeah. Ideally, everybody has their thing, right? A lot of people look at that and they're like, oh, I could never do that. And that's okay. Maybe you can't. That's some people prefer to just be able to write what they want to write and be free within, that creative
Yeah.
space, which is great. But I've also written a couple of thriller horror movies, and I had one that had a shopping agreement. And so, in that genre, there really are no rules per se. So, that went through a lot of rewriting, which was challenging because what would happen is the producer director team that took it out, they would get notes from whoever they took it out to the production company, and the production company would say, oh sure, well we like this, but like you mentioned, there's some budgetary constraints with this style, so can you go back and make these changes? And so I would go back and make the changes that they asked for. And what I learned through this process
Hmm.
is, don't make tons of changes until someone puts money down.
Interesting.
right?
Yep.
Because they would go to then another production company and they would have a different thought and I would make those changes. And I didn't realize what was happening, which is, they're trying to like change it and craft it for each person's notes, but each person had different notes and a different vision for it. But they weren't promising to buy it. They weren't promising to make it. They were just, yeah, maybe we'll do it if you make these changes. And what I learned is there has to be a limit to how many changes you make and who you're making them for, right? If
Yes. Yes. Definitely want to stay on this for a minute. Can you explain for anyone who might not know what a shopping agreement is?
Okay, so a shopping agreement is I've written a script, a producer takes interest in it, and for a specified period of time, usually it's a year or 18 months, they have the exclusive rights to take that script out and try to sell it.
Okay.
So once you're in a shopping agreement, it means that I can't send it out to anyone else to make. Producer A that has the shopping agreement with me, he's the only one or she's the only one who can take it out and try to sell it.
Got it. Okay. Um, Now the rewrites thing, I've heard, I forgot from who, some screenwriter, but what they were saying, you know, you should be at some point you need to be charging people for rewrites. Have you heard this? Have you experienced this? I mean, you don't have a lot of bargaining. Maybe it's only after it's been sold can you actually kind of request that. But right, but before when they're just kind of interested, they're
Hmm.
you're kind of stuck doing all that work for free. Uh, and that what you're saying is like there should be kind of a line that you draw, or at least how do you decide what's enough to or what's too much or what?
Yeah, that's there's really no black and white answer for that. It's a little bit tricky.
Yeah.
When I had my deal made, for the movie that actually got made called Scottish Christmas Secret, my manager had written into my contract that I would turn in the originals, this first draft of the script, and then they would get two rewrites and one polish. So that I wouldn't end up in rewrite hell because that can happen. If people think that they have endless, amounts of rewrites and notes, they can just keep you going and going and going sometimes because sometimes what happens is the producer doesn't even really know exactly what they want, but they're waiting for you to hit it. So they're like, I'll know it when I see it. Right. And that can be very elusive. So we did limit that. Now, that doesn't mean I necessarily stuck to that. I did end up doing, I think, three rewrites, and that's fine. That was a choice. And I felt like that was important for the project because I really wanted to see this project go and I knew it was going to go. So you just kind of stick with it until you get it to where everyone is really happy with it, right? But as far as doing it for free, so I was paid for that. So, but on those shopping agreements, I was not paid for doing those notes. So I think, yeah, you have to decide how many times do I want to rewrite this? Like I was stuck for 1 year on one script, just rewriting and rewriting and rewriting without stopping to ask, why are we doing these rewrites?
Mm,
Right? There's no promise that this person is going to buy this. So why am I rewriting this for this person who may or may not even take a second read?
mm,
So we have to be, that was the lesson I learned is to be a little more critical, to advocate for yourself for sure. And to not be afraid to. Sometimes I think we're also afraid because we think, oh, well, I don't want them to think I'm being difficult. And it's like, well, you're not being difficult. You're also just protecting your time,
right. Yeah.
So
Yeah. And there's a kind of an inherent power dynamic where they have the keys to the kingdom and you're trying to get in. Uh,
yeah,
you want your movie made? Well, you have to do what I say, and that's the really unfortunate part. But yes, if you stick to your guns, if you can walk away when it gets to that, that's kind of that's another skill, right? Another tool in the toolbox as a writer, right? A little bit of
definitely.
self advocacy.
And yeah, and just deciding on what hill do you want to die on,
Hmm. Right.
you know? So, you can't be difficult. You have to be open minded for sure. You have to be receptive, but also you know, watch what's happening. I guess just use your best discernment in the situation so that you don't get taken advantage of or spun out, because then you get very frustrated. And then suddenly, this project you were so passionate about, you're like, I never want to see this script again.
Yeah. I mean,
Burnout is real.
no, I mean, that was gonna be my next question is, you're spending a year on the same script, um, you're ostensibly changing it quite a bit from your original. You're writing for somebody else. It's almost like it's not even your script completely, so now you're
Hmm.
maybe even detached from the material. Did you have that struggle? And, how did you kind of pull it together enough to keep going for, like, a year?
I definitely hit burnout at a certain point. I think it definitely happens. I've seen it happen to many writers, even top level writers. We all experience this burnout of just like, I'm so frustrated with getting notes and feeling like a loser. I don't know why I'm doing this anymore.
Yeah.
What is the purpose of my life? You know? So the way out of that burnout, there are multiple ways out. I don't think there's one thing. You have to have a toolkit of ways to get out and to reignite your passion. One thing for me, I think, okay, what else would I do if I weren't writing? And for me, there's nothing. There's nothing else. When I think about anything else, my body just goes, epileptic.
Yeah,
It
right.
clenches up and it fights me. So I think, okay, my brain can trick me and convince me of all kinds of stories and lies and things, right? Your body's never going to lie to you. So I have a very visceral response to that. So, okay, if this is the only thing I can do, now what? So the next piece of that, I say, build your community, know who your people are that are going to support you. And having my writing group is really paramount for that exact moment. When I'm super frustrated, I reach out to some of them or one of them in particular, or just the whole group. I'm like, guys, I'm really frustrated. I don't know what to do. They'll talk me up, they'll build me up, make me feel good. And they're like, send me the script. Like, maybe we can help you. What are the notes? Like, let's talk through it. And that is so invaluable. Or just the friend that's like, what do you need? How can I take care of you in this moment of desperate, depression and feeling like your life is over because
Yeah.
this script is too hard? And, your friend who comes over and runs you a bath and cooks you a meal or gives you a hug, or, that. And also for me, I have a spiritual practice. And it's interesting. I was actually just at this panel that they were talking to a whole bunch of people, Latin, particularly Latin people in the industry. And it was interesting to see how many people said the same thing, which was having a strong spiritual practice. Just that I trust in the universe. I think these things are happening for a reason. Let me just trust the process and lean into this idea of I'm going to be okay because I have this universe that loves me and is watching out for me, or my angels are going to support me, whatever it is you believe. But having something bigger than yourself, I think, is also very helpful
Yeah.
in life in general.
Right, right, yeah, that's a life benefit, not just a work benefit for sure. And I like the idea of the writers group being almost a de facto support group, you know?
Hmm.
Because you're not just learning how to write, you're not just writing without connecting with these people and being able to share, so that's another benefit for joining a writers group. I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Community.
Yeah, so you mentioned a manager. How did you get yourself a manager?
Well, that is a funny story. There are definitely a zillion ways to go about it.
Okay.
I got lucky through relationships, which is 100% how I have made any progress in this industry, has only been through my relationships, I would say. I mean, obviously, my hard work and my ability to do the job, those count, but it's my relationships that were everything. So I have a friend who is a writer and her husband is a manager. Our kids are friends.
Huh?
So I
Yeah.
got to know him personally and, you know,
Yeah. I mean, I understand your kind of I don't know, your reaction to having to explain that because but there's a lot of people outside, living outside of Los Angeles, right? Who
Hmm.
might not have those connections, just casual personal connections that also can lead to professional connections.
Yeah.
And I think that is really interesting. It's a really interesting dilemma for people because living in LA is not for everybody.
Yeah.
And but if you move here, I mean, you're going to meet people who have connections. Just you don't even have to try, right? Like
Yeah.
you work at a place, any place. You could be a barista, and you're gonna meet other people working there, maybe who are trying to be actors and writers and whatnot. The customers coming in, so it is a real thing that people should really consider. Can you live here? Can you move here? Because in a lot of ways, it makes that part, it opens it up quite a bit for you to meet those people and let those people, those relationships, yield something.
Yeah. Well, and I would say also, the other part of that is I also know a lot of people who live here who don't have managers, and they're like, "How did you get a manager?" I have friends in New York and places where presumably you could make these relationships. So I will say I'm a particularly, even though I am an introvert and I love spending time alone, I'm also really gregarious. I also don't have a problem talking to people, and I will advocate for myself and I will ask for what I need. A lot of writers and people who are creative are not comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
I hear that from everyone. They're like, "How do you meet these people?" I go to an event and I meet someone and I'm like, "Great, can we exchange phone numbers? Can we have coffee?" And I will follow up on them, on
Mhm.
those connections, right? If someone gives me their number, I am following up. I am consistent with it. I write it down on a list, follow up with this person, return this email. And I really stay on top of managing those relationships, which I know a lot of people struggle with or not great with. People ask, "Well, how do you know if I've sent an email? How long should I wait?" The standard is about 2 weeks, right? Try it a few times. But so I'm a naturally personable person. So this isn't even maybe the best route for most people. So I will say, in trying to get a manager, I do actually have some advice because I have, looked for other managers who maybe are in bigger spaces as I'm growing that I want to get into. And this has been an issue in my writing group because none of the other women in my writing group are here, by the way. One is in Japan, one is in Australia, one is in Washington, DC. They're scattered all over the world,
Yeah.
literally. So we collectively have looked into resources and how do we do this? And we invite people into our writing group to give us advice. So, one of the women in my group, this woman, Angie, she happens to be a producer at an audio book company. So she's got a lot of great connections, this is another reason why it's great to have a group, right? So she's able to reach out to people and say, "Hey, can you come talk to our group and tell us how to do these things?" And one of the big things is, how do we get managers? I'm the only one out of seven us who has management. So one thing I can give as advice, I don't care what anyone else says. If anyone says anything different than this, they're wrong, because I've talked to a lot of managers. You have to have at least 2 to 3 completed scripts that you feel are ready to go. No less than 2, at least 3 in the genre that you want to be writing.
Mm.
Because a manager wants to know, if you have one script, they don't know if that took you 10 years to write, 15 years to write. And if they sell you as a writer, are you going to be able to do it again? You need to be able to prove, yes, I can do this over and over and over again. So if you want to write TV, have at least 3 TV pilot scripts. If you want to write horror movies, have 2 or 3 horrors. I like to write rom-com Christmas movies, and I love to write horror. I'm a huge pulp horror fan. And so I've got 3 horror scripts and I've got 3 Christmas movies. And then on top of that, I have, I think, 6 movies outlined, just the outlines. And then I have a bunch of one pagers for ideas that I would like to eventually develop. I think I have 10 of those. And so that makes me more attractive to a manager. And they actually want that. They have asked for that, which is why I put that together as a profile. So I've interviewed managers just to say, like, hey, what do you need? What would you need from me? And that's really what they're looking for. They're looking for someone, maybe you have a social media account. It's not going to hurt you to have good social media, to be out there advocating for yourself. They want to know that you're motivated to get meetings, try to get meetings. And the way you could get meetings, find a lower level production company that's making movies that you want to write and find out who are their development executives. Send them an email. You can send emails. Do not send your script ever. Legally, they cannot open it. They legally cannot open it. They can't look at it. So that is one huge faux pas that a lot of people make. Don't send any material that you have written. You just reach out. Hey, so and so, you're making the types of movies that I love to write. I have a few scripts that I've written like that. I would love to have a conversation with you. Can we talk? Keep it really simple, really light. Show that you've done your research, and this goes for the managers. So, get online. We have access to all this information now. Get online. Who who reps writers who are in the spaces that you want to be in. So if you want to write pulpy horror movies for Blumhouse, what production companies are they working with,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
You want to write Christmas movies for Hallmark, who are they working with? Well, that would be Front Street, MPCA. Those are the companies. You see them listed in the credits. Do some research, reach out to those people, because they're looking for writers. They want writers. And that's the shift in perspective, right? You're not asking someone for a favor. You're saying, I have a product that you
Yeah.
need.
Right.
And I think shifting your perspective in that way also helps people who are a little shy or afraid to reach out. And it's like, no, 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 you're offering your services. Be of service to people. What can I do? What can I offer you of myself? And that's also how I make a lot of these relationships, right? I say, how can I help you? Do I know someone that maybe you would like to meet? Can I read some scripts for you? I'm willing to do some coverage for free if you need it, or however you can get involved to make those relationships.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That was a lot of great stuff. Yes, for sure having material prepped for when you do get that conversation, that elevator situation where you have, you're finally in a position to talk to somebody and they say, "Great, what have you got?" And you say, "Oh, well, nothing." That's going to go bad. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, and that goes back to kind of what we were talking about earlier with you, like doing the work that needs to get done before you can actually be the thing.
Yes.
Everyone wants to be the thing right away, and it's not that easy. So that's critical.
Yeah, and the other thing about that too is, what I think is so interesting, having conversations with people when I tell them I'm a writer and I work in TV and in film, and they say, I'm a writer. I'm like, oh, that's great. What have you written? And they say nothing. My question is always, if this is the job you're going for, but you haven't done it, how do you know you're going to like it? You know, People watch movies and they say, I could have written that. That's so easy. I could do that. I'm like, no, you can't. I'm like, try it. Try sitting down. It is not as easy as you think it is. This is a skill. It is a skill that requires practice.
Yeah.
No one just sits down and like knocks out, the best movie ever written. It's practice, it's a way of thinking, it's a way of doing that. It's not easy to sit there and have these characters talking in your head. I know it seems like it is, but it's really not. I mean, my first script took a full year for me to write. And I know I've talked to people who say it's taken them 10 years to write their first script, and then they get it and then they're on a roll.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Right.
But you have to sit down and do it. And you need to know that you like it. And even if you haven't sold anything, but you say you want to be a writer, you need to be writing a new script at least once a year. Every manager also will tell you this, like, if this is really what you want to be doing, you should be writing a new script at least once a year, if not once every 6 months.
Right. Well, that's a perfect segue into my next question. Is kind of a process question. Every writer is different, and maybe even within the writer doing it differently each time or something. But I know for myself, there's a certain time of day, there's a certain routine, there's a certain, steps you have to take to be able to treat this like a job, even when it's not your job, even when you're not
Hmm.
getting paid. So finding the motivation to sit down and write every day. So can you walk us through, your
Yeah, so that was a hard one battle for me. I am not naturally a very disciplined person. No, I tend to always have 2 to 3 jobs. I tend to have a lot of things that I like to do, a lot of interests, and so I really had to train myself to get into something that resembled routine. I'm still not great at routine. But for people who are like me, who are creative, I'm also a single mom. I also do have a full-time job at a TV production company, but nonetheless, so that's also has its own demands. And then I have my own writing that I do on the side for my own success in that way, because I'm just on the development side. So, I'm not writing necessarily. I had one friend who gave me this really great piece of advice, and she was like, figure out what your prime time is. Everybody has a prime time, right? It's sort of like part of the circadian rhythm. And so I really sat with that and I thought, okay, between the hours of 9 a.m. and 12, I'm good. I'm not tired. I have energy. I don't usually have a lot of demands at work. My kids at school, that's my prime time. And usually after about 12, I start slowing down. I get a little tired. And then later in the evening, I might have another pickup, but I might also then have my kid. So it's impossible to write when your teenager is at home. My kid is not the kind that goes in her room and sits on her phone. She wants to be where I am. She wants to be interacting. She still
Yeah.
likes me. And I'm here for it. I'm like, okay, this is like a blessing. I am going to take every minute of it.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
So, and the other thing is, I think finding passion, like writing stuff that you're excited to write about. Think about your characters. Like, I let them live in my head when I'm taking a shower, when I'm doing the dishes, and that gets me really excited to write the story, right?
Mhm.
I just let them live in my head so that I want to do it. I want to get it out on paper. That's one. Two, finding the time, just carve out that time as if it is your job. I put it on my schedule. This is my work time. I'm locked in. I'm going to do it. And the other thing is a study I read a long time ago, which is really relevant. And that is if you have a job that would take 1 hour to do, but you have 8 hours in which to complete it, you will spend 8 hours
Yeah,
doing that thing.
right.
Right. And so that's an interesting thing to know about the psychology of humans. And this is really important. I actually have ADHD. I was diagnosed as a kid. So anyone out there who has it knows time management is nearly impossible. I had this really great therapist who taught me something called time blocking. What you do, because also with ADHD, you can hyper focus.
Mhm.
So one way to get into that hyper focus mode, which is great, you actually like block off 2 hours and these 2 hours I'm going to do this thing and I have to accomplish, let's say 5 pages is pretty reasonable for me, right? I know I can write about 5 pages of a script in 2 hours. So I block off that time and I set that goal and I
Mhm.
really fight to try to make that goal. And that's been the best tool for me. It's just that discipline of giving a very specific, rigid time limit.
Right. Yeah. Yep. That sounds about right. I mean, if you there's but I also really like what you said about kind of your when you're brainstorming or working, writing in the head throughout the day when you're not supposed to be writing, then it's I feel like that's kind of freeing, right? It's kind of like you're not writing, you're just thinking and you're just there's no
Hmm.
pressure and that's when some of the best kind of creativity might come out. But then you're still working on it. You're doing because so much of writing is thinking, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah, that's like the funny jokes on Instagram. It's like 90% thinking,
yeah,
10% actually writing. And it's true.
Yeah, I mean, and if you have that 2 hours, like you're saying, you could spend it sitting and thinking,
Mhm.
uh, or you could take that 2 hours of thinking, piece it out throughout the day, and so that you're set up for 2 hours of, like, putting it down on paper.
Oh,
Are
and I
there
was gonna say one other really quick thing about that too, which this was a piece of advice I got from a filmmaker who's made really huge movies. And so he'll give me advice every now and then. And the best advice he ever gave me is do your vomit draft. Don't police yourself on that first draft. Just barf it out, let your characters talk. Don't worry about your page count. Don't worry about anything. Just let your characters talk and just vomit it out on the
Yeah,
page.
right, right.
And that was the most freeing advice I have ever been given.
Yes, and probably goes back to your perfectionism, right? You're allowing yourself to not be self-critical, and
Hmm.
that's when things just start flowing. That's great. Okay. All right. I think JJ, thank you so much for your time. This has been a very informative conversation. I think there's a lot of really good stuff that you've given us. It's clear that you've not just done this work and gone through it, but that you're thinking about it, that you understand the process. I think that's probably one of the things that, especially new writers, you just have to learn it, right? You just have to have that experience of understanding the process of writing and how you best fit into it and how it works for you, because not everyone's gonna be able to work like you do, and so finding your own way is important. But yes, thanks again so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. We'll I know I know we'll definitely be advertising your film, because I know it's
Thank you.
coming out later this year.
Yeah.
And we'll put some links in the description if you want, for people who might want to connect with you or follow along with what you got going. But,
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
yeah, have a great night, and we'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thank you so much. This was so fun and it's such a pleasure. And thank you for letting me share my story.
Oh, pleasure was mine. Thank you. All
Yeah.
right, take care.
Bye.